Good morning, Lee.
Good to see you, Frank. Hi, Candace. Nice to meet you. Hope I share with you some really helpful information today on thermal imaging. Looking forward to it. Anyway, I've got some other information there in front of you. Just pad, pen, the traditional kind of stuff to put on your desk and use around. I've got a brochure there that explains the process of a home inspection, basically. I was doing a class at Champion School of Real Estate the other day, and I just found out that there is an 8-hour class for real estate agents to help them understand the basics and a broad overview of what an inspection process is. And one of the realtors that was in that particular class had just finished taking the course. His instructor was the first instructor that I ever had, and when he looked at all the information, he said, well, this is everything that we just learned. So we've got it all in a brochure for you. Anyway, and then also the other sheet of paper that I have there is a newspaper article that I write once a month. On the back of that page there, Candace, is it's a newspaper article just on a home maintenance tip. Comes out in a newspaper up in the Willis area once a month on the first Monday of the month, and which is today. So my March article is coming out today, and I'm putting this together in a flyer so that it can go out in boxes, and then I'll also send it out digitally with a link that if you wanted to use that article and send it to real estate clients, you could. A nice, friendly, helpful, non-threatening way to stay in touch, keep in front of your clients, and just something that I really enjoy doing to help you guys out. Come in.
Good morning.
And so anyway, there's a lot of information about the inspection process out there. And on the National Association of Realtors website, there is a field guide to home inspections. And I just wanted to show this to you. There's articles on here. I kind of laugh at this coat. Look at that guy's coat. I think it needs to be another size up or so, you think? But questions to ask a home inspector. Home Inspection 101. And look at all these topics that are available to you realtors.
Wow.
To help out. 10 questions to ask home inspectors. The 10 most common home inspection problems. What do you think some of those might be?
AC.
AC? Roof?
Inaccessible breaker box.
Inaccessible breaker box? I don't think that one was on the list. Let's see here.
It's on the screen now.
It's on the screen now? Okay, there you go. Faulty wiring. Breaker box problems, you call them out almost every time. There's something wrong on almost every breaker box in a house.
Yes.
Minor that it might be. Grading though. Brand new houses, my goodness. You go to a brand new house that's never been lived in before and they want to make it look great, so they put mulch in front and they pile it high,
right, and
it's over the weep holes.
Yes.
It's already causing a problem. I've gone into new houses where you can see the ant beds already going into the weep holes of a brand new house that's never been lived in.
Yes.
Faulty gutters. We don't have a whole lot of basement dampness here in this area, but in other parts of the country, my middle son lives in eastern Tennessee, and I went to his house for Christmas. We were there for almost 2 weeks, and I inspected my son's home. He had an incredible amount of dampness in his basement in 2 different places, and I fixed both of them. Roof problems, foundation flaws, poor upkeep, faulty plumbing, poor ventilation, and defective heating. Those are the 10 that they say are the most common around the United States. But there's great stuff on the website, really some helpful information for you. Also, Chase Bank. I'm not going to put this up on the screen, but Chase Bank has your complete guide to home inspections. I don't know who wrote this because the author of it isn't on here. They say that the average inspection takes 2 to 2.5 hours. I don't know who their inspectors are, but mine take longer than that. Hour to hour and a half for a condo. They talk about the different areas. There's a lot of good information on here, but the standards that we are guided by here in Texas are called the standards of practice. TREC puts them out. We don't just have our code 1102 to the Texas Occupations Code. I believe you all are governed by chapter or 1101. But we also have our standards of practice, and this gives us the minimum standards by which we are governed to inspect a house. What do we have to do? What do we have to say we couldn't do if we're supposed to do it? And why? Like an inaccessible breaker box. If the breaker box is inaccessible, we have to state that in the report. I include a picture of why it's inaccessible. in there. Or an attic, if something's bad in the attic, if I can't get to the air conditioner. And there have been some attics where I can't get to the air conditioners. It's just impossible. But we have those that govern us. There are also associations for inspectors, a number of different statewide organizations and national organizations. I'm a member of Texas Professional Real Estate Inspectors Association. We call it TPRIA. And then another one called INTERNACHI, International Association of Certified Home Inspectors. And they're great networking groups. We get a lot of training from them, and the education is wonderful. The Texas Standards of Practice, for you as a realtor, I want you to know, are probably the best guidelines in the United States. It is harder to be an inspector in Texas than in any other state. And that's good for you, it's good for the consumer, it's good for everybody. The standards of practice were developed about 25 years ago. There were no standards, there was no report form. Inspectors could do anything they wanted, they could inspect anything they wanted or not what they wanted, and you got what you got with the inspector that you got. And this was in the 70s and 80s and even in the early 90s. Fred Wilcox, who is one of the first inspectors, was my first instructor, and he was the chairman of the committee that put together these standards of practice. And they govern a lot. We had to study them backwards, forwards, inside and out to pass our exams. And then we have to, just like you, we have to take continuing education. We have to take, the only course that's required for us to take every 2 years is an update on the legal and ethics and the standards of practice. So we have to stay up to date on that. An important area that's not in the standards of practice, bless you, is thermal imaging. It is emerging. There are some people that are saying that they feel like it will probably be added to the standards of practice one day because of its importance and because of what you can see with it, but it's not yet. And so it's not required for inspections. Many inspectors don't use them. Some inspectors do use them. And I want to explain to you a little bit about thermal imaging and what it is. I want to talk about some history and background on thermal imaging. You've probably seen it. You didn't know you were looking at it. What it is, what it's not, and then some of the benefits and some of the areas where we can take a look at it. This is the 70th birthday of thermal imaging. It actually started in 1946, and it was used, where do you think it might have been used at?
Military.
Bingo. Exactly. It was used in the military. You've probably seen it in a movie. In the 60s, it moved to buildings to discover and reduce the risk of electrical fires. In the 70s, it moved into manufacturing. Before some manufacturing is complete, thermal imaging can be brought in and look at things to determine some deficiencies to make sure that things are manufactured and constructed correctly. And in the 80s, it moved into the residential industry. But the cameras at that time, you know, I brought a sample camera. This is a really nice Nikon camera. I bought it over 10 years ago. The camera that I can buy today for half the price far exceeds this one. It's still a nice camera, but I've seen you have a really nice camera, Frank. But sometimes I think, boy, you want to wait until the prices go down and the next model comes out, but if you do, you'll never buy anything, right? So anyway, same thing with cameras has happened with thermal imaging cameras. This is a thermal imaging camera right here. It's made by a company called Fluke. There's another brand. It's the two big brands are really called FLIR. But just to give you an idea of what these cameras are, this camera here, I believe it cost me $1,200 or $1,300 when I bought it. Nice camera. Did thermal imaging cameras? Do you know what they see?
Heat.
They see heat. They see the temperature of a surface, and we're going to talk about that and why that's important. The average thermal imaging camera for a real estate inspection will cost anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000. And you can go on up from there. They used to be a whole lot more expensive. And just like cameras that we have like this, by the way, do you know the #1 camera in the world now?
With a Canon?
It's your phone.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's your phone.
You got me.
More pictures are taken on phones than any other device now, hands down. And the quality of pictures, remember the first pictures on the flip phones? You know, you could barely tell what the resolution was. Well, the resolution has gotten better. It's the same with thermal imaging cameras. Thermal imaging cameras have different amounts of resolution. They're not measured in megabytes, they're measured in pixels. And this right here takes a picture of 160 by 120. You can get higher than that, you can go lower than that. This is pretty standard. This is what they say you should have for building type inspections. This camera right here is a $4,500 camera. And it's why a lot of inspectors don't use cameras, because...
Is there an app for that on your phone yet? No, just kidding.
You laugh about that. No, there actually is. And you can use an app for a very, very basic thermal image. I forget how much it is. They have some new, they just came out with them. It's called the FLIR 1. And they have some thermal imaging cameras that are about the size of an iPhone. And they're $700 for that camera. But these cameras see a lot. I'm going to show you an image on it here in a little while. But what is thermal imaging? And before we ask that, let's answer the question what it's not. Thermal imaging is not X-ray vision. It doesn't see through walls. Some people think that it does, because you'll see some information out there on the internet, and you believe everything on the internet, right?
Right.
That gives you the impression that thermal imaging sees through walls. It doesn't actually see through walls, and I'm going to show you why. It's not X-ray vision. It doesn't look into the wall cavity. Now, when you look at a thermal image, you might see the studs going up and down the wall, and you'll see different colors, if you will, but it doesn't see into the wall. It doesn't tell you if something's wet or dry. And we're looking for things that are wet or dry with a thermal imaging camera, but it doesn't tell you if it's wet or dry. And I'm going to explain that a little bit also. It doesn't tell you if a wall or a ceiling has or doesn't have insulation. And you're looking at me really strange, because you think that, well, we use it to discover that, but I'm going to show you the difference in what I mean by that. It doesn't tell you if it's wet or dry. It doesn't tell you if there's insulation. It just tells you the temperature. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to talk about how to interpret that. A real thermal image is only black and white. Now you see them in color. They add color for pizzazz. And I can change the color scheme on that, just like you can change the color on all sorts of things. But a true thermal image is strictly black and white. The hotter areas are the whiter areas, the darker areas that are the colder areas. You've probably seen it in movies and you didn't know it. And I've got one example. I'm not going to play the scene for you, but in the movie Patriot Games with Harrison Ford, James Earl Jones is the head of the CIA. They're looking for a rogue group of terrorists that are in a remote spot someplace on the planet, and they're looking to do away with them. And you see thermal images of people running around and stuff like that, these black and white images. That's thermal imaging. It's used for the military. Now, the reason that the image is showing up the way that it is that the body heat is warmer than the ground. Mm-hmm. And it's showing different, and so the image is showing to be in the form of a person. Mm-hmm. But it's not seeing through them, it's just seeing their temperature. And so there's a scene in the movie at about the hour and 30-minute mark of the movie, because I watched it again yesterday just to make sure. I thought, I remember that movie and I remember the scene. Where is it? So I had to go watch it. But what is thermal imaging? It shows one thing: the temperature of a surface. I can take my camera and I can hold it up and I can see what the temperature of that wall is. I can hold it to your forehead and I can see what the temperature of your forehead is. It shows the temperature of a surface. And so why is that thermal image important? What's it indicating? What's it showing you? All sorts of stuff, and I'm going to explain that. I've got a video that I want to show you here on things that are found with a thermal image, and I'm going to pause it, stop, start, and explain some of these things to you on what this is. There's no sound to it. It's just images, and then it's the thermal image. And so here is, right here, water on a floor from a leaking window. And here's what the thermal image looks like.
Wow.
And I'm going to explain what these are called in a minute, but that's what the thermal image looks like. The next picture is from a jetted tub. Now, if you're walking through a house and you're doing a walkthrough to sell somebody a home, does that ceiling look normal except that it's popcorn?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody likes popcorn ceilings anymore, right? Okay, it's a ceiling. But guess what's above it? A bathroom. Here's what the ceiling looks like with a thermal image. It's soaking wet. There's a leak in the tub and the plumbing.
The water is cooler?
Yep,
Okay.
yep, that's it. Here's one missing insulation. You can't tell by looking at a wall where there's insulation or not there, but the thermal image is going to show a thermal anomaly there, so that this right here is a cooler area, but you've got one whole strip where
Right.
I don't know what's wrong there. All I see is a temperature difference. So what do I have to do?
Investigate.
I got to investigate it. When you see what we call a thermal anomaly, and I'm going to define that's going to be the one term you're going to walk away with today, I've got to go then discover what the problem is. What's going on there? Because I don't know what the problem is there. Here's a roof leak. Right there in the corner. Now, I can't tell it's a roof leak just by looking at that. I have to still then go investigate it. Well, I'll tell you what, breaker boxes, look at that wire right there.
Wow.
Super hot. I have a very trusted electrician that I've known for 25 years. I went troubleshooting with him one day this last summer. I just said, hey, can I hang out with you? Can I just go with you to see what you see even more than what I see? And so I did. According to David, the number one reason for house fires and electrical service panels is very simple: loose connections. All you got to do is just tighten the screws on the wires and so forth. If you've got a loose connection, the wire's trying to connect with it, and it's going to be hotter. My neighbor's house across the street from us in June of 2001, after our houses flooded with Tropical Storm Allison, I was at A&M with my son in the dorm for his orientation, my oldest son, and my wife calls me to tell me that the neighbor's house across the street burned down. Electrical service panel. And it started in the garage. And then the paint cans started exploding like bombs, and the next door neighbor went out there and starts hearing these things, and he got away from there, and the whole house was ruined. And it started in the service panel. Service panels need regular checkups, which was the subject of my article a couple of months ago in Christmas in the newspaper. Basement, something's going on the floor right there. Lots of different images. Here's another service panel where some wires are overheating. You can see that right there. Oh. You know what that was?
Yeah, they
blocked it.
Yeah, well,
They didn't cut it open.
That's right.
Yeah. I remember you were telling me about
Chasmard.
a home builder that
Did that in my house.
just put the grid up. Tell the story, Frank.
They screwed the grid onto the drywall, and as if there was a hole there.
For the
grill?
filter.
For the grill. They never even cut the hole. They just screwed the grill on there.
So funny.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what that is. By just looking at it, I've got to do some further investigation right there.
It's a bunch of rats.
Yeah, it could have been that was a remodel and they came in and they covered over a hole where there used to be ductwork.
Yeah.
And so forth. But again, wires, holes, moisture, all sorts of stuff. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an example of some of that. They're even using thermal imaging. I found this article to reveal anomalies in the pyramids now.
Okay.
Thousands of years after these things are built, with the technology that we have today, they're coming in and they're discovering caverns and caves and passageways in pyramids using thermal imaging. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a whole lot more camera than what I got, I assure you. But see the term there right there, thermal anomaly? That's what I want to explain to us. The benefits of using thermal imaging. According to the Monroe Infrared Technology Institute, where I received my certification as a certified residential thermographer, the number one reason to use thermal imaging is to find moisture. Mm-hmm. Moisture issues. It's used for many things, but moisture is the number one issue. What happens when you've got moisture inside a wall when it's not supposed to be there? What happens?
Mold.
Mold.
Rot.
Rot. Mm-hmm. Yep, all sorts of things happen inside the wall that you can't see. The thermal imaging, like I said, it doesn't tell you if it's wet or dry. It just shows you that there's a thermal anomaly, there's a difference in the temperature, and we're supposed to go and find out what it is. A thermal anomaly is a difference in temperature from the norm of what it should be or from the average around it. That's all it is. and the camera shows that difference. And so when we see that difference, then we have to investigate with something like a moisture meter or an ice pick. We call them an awl. But an ice pick, sometimes I'll go in either in wood or sheetrock and I'll just touch it barely and it's soaking wet. I can push it through there with no effort at all. It's rotten. It's wet. It's soaking wet. It's lost its integrity and it needs to be fixed and replaced. I want to show you a house that was right here in the Woodlands.
Can you see moisture in stucco?
You can see the thermal anomaly in it, yes, sure can. This is a bathroom remodel in a house built here in the Woodlands in 1983. I inspected this house in January. Wouldn't you like to see a bathroom like that in a house built in 1983? Looks beautiful, doesn't it? In the master bathroom, what they did is they took the tub out and they left the tub out and they put this shower in. It's 4 feet wide by 5 feet long. It's a beautiful remodel. And on the other side of that is the master bedroom. This wall right here, there's the new sink and cabinet. This is the wall that is the back of that shower. It looks beautiful. But guess what? The wall here in the floor, right in there, was showing a thermal anomaly. And because there was a shower there, I surmised it was probably wet. I took my moisture meter and the wall and the floor right there, I'm over here, I'm moving this way, and it got up to over 35% wet. Same thing on the wall. I was up high, I came down low, and it was wet. Sadly, the person who was looking to buy the house lost their job as an EMT here in the Woodlands and had to back out of the deal for funding. But the seller was willing to work with them to take care of it. It can be fixed. When I bought my house in Willis 5 years ago, within the first 6 months, I discovered a leak in the wall between my master bathroom shower and my two bathrooms butt up against each other. And I noticed that under the kitchen sink, it was smelling damp. I had that musty smell. And I started seeing some mold on the wall underneath the cabinet. It was all hidden, and I thought, well, something's going on. I cut the hole out, and I took out the stem on the master shower and found what was leaking, had to cut the sheetrock underneath the cabinet, fix it all up, and it hadn't leaked in over 4 years. I don't know what the problem is there, but something needs to be taken apart to figure out what's wrong and fix it.
Lee, if they determine it's a water leak and they fix the water leak, will that area dry out?
Good question. It will dry out. Mine did. I didn't have to replace anything. All I did is instead of replacing the sheetrock because it was under a cabinet, I got a nice piece of wood and cut it to size and screwed it in there to the studs and just covered up. It's underneath the cabinet. I didn't feel like I needed to go through the pain of texting and sheetrock and all that other kind of stuff underneath there. Plus, now I have a panel that I can take off and I can see behind there if I need to.
Right.
It depends on how damaged it is. And let me give you another case in point. My wife and I, we bought a house in 1999 in Prestonwood Forest. It's called the Christmas Light Subdivision near Willowbrook Mall. The guy that I bought the house from had built a deck up against the back wall. He put it on top of the patio and put it all the way up against the wall, and so it covered the sill plates, the weep holes, all the way on the back of the house. Well, in between that little gap between the deck and the brick, leaves and moisture came down, and that was where the back of the house. There was no guttering. Water fell there, and for years had just been staying damp and wet. When our house flooded, first of all, we had foundation damage, and when they did that, they dug these huge holes on the outside. They had to take the deck apart. So they dug these holes, and I rebuilt the deck away from the house 3 feet so that there was a sidewalk there. I cleared the sidewalk so that I kept that area dry. Everything looked nice still. However, when our house flooded the next year, I gutted the inside of my house, and I noticed that the sill plate along the bottom on the whole back wall was so rotten, I literally reached down, grabbed the 2x4, and it crumbled in my hands. It was totally rotten. And as a result, because there was no integrity on it, it was soft, the whole back of my house had fallen about a half an inch.
Right.
I had to jack up my back of the house, take the whole sill plate out, and put a new sill plate underneath there. And that was because of moisture. But if you catch it early enough, it's not damaged so much that you'd have to replace it. It just depends. But the area will dry out, and the mold will go away because mold thrives on moisture.
Right.
If the moisture is maintained, the mold will continue to grow. Take away the moisture, the mold goes away. Great question. This right here is going to, if it stays that wet, it's going to continue to grow stuff inside the wall, and it's going to lose its integrity, and it needs to be fixed as early as possible. I'm guessing that this remodel was pretty recent, so hopefully when they started taking it apart, cutting the sheetrock out there and finding out what was wrong in the shower installation, it would have been an easy fix. But you don't know. And in a situation like this, as a real estate agent, you know that if the seller's not willing to fix it, the buyer may not want to take the risk to buy it because they have no idea what they're going to discover when they get into that.
Right.
It could be simple, it could be extremely expensive. So that was just one that I wanted to show you about. I want to show you a thermal anomaly, and I want to do it by, I'm going to put some ice in my hand, okay? And I'm going to let my hand get kind of cold here for a minute. I'm going to turn my camera on. I'm just going to hold this for a minute, okay? Just to get my hand good, cold, and wet, and I'm going to show you something. But what are some other areas that the thermal imaging camera shows? I want to explain it to you. Insulation in houses. I can't tell what's going on, but I can look to see in an attic or in a wall that might be exposed in an attic. I can see what the issue is with insulation, and I can see where insulation might be missing. This is key in new construction. It's amazing how much new construction, how much insulation is missing even in these houses. Electrical issues. You can't detect just by looking at it that wire's hot unless there's some burn signs on it, but the majority of them you can't tell. Now, my hand is good and cold right now, and if I point this right here to the wall, can everybody see this? Mm-hmm. You're just looking right here at the wall. I'm going to take my hand's nice and clean, it's wet, I'm going to put it right there on the wall. Now, there's paint right there, but it is going to soak a little bit. You see my handprint there?
Yeah.
That's a thermal anomaly. The wall is colder where my hand was, and it's wet. The temperature changed that rapidly, and the camera shows that. That's what you're seeing when you see it in a house. It's just multiply that by insulation or moisture in a whole area. But can you see the wet? The wall doesn't look any different, does it?
No.
It's the same way in a house. And that's what the camera will show up. Electrical issues, door and window seals. Point it around a door and you can see real clearly a very defined line around a door. What about pests? Ants, mice, a beehive. My parents in their historic home in Galveston, in what we call the carriage house behind the house, it's on Broadway, had an enormous beehive in the attic. I was in charge of a building out in West Texas years ago, and there was a beehive that was about 5 or 6 feet long in the cavity of this old building that was abandoned. But bees also inhabit inhabited buildings. And if there's a beehive in the wall, what do you think the thermal anomaly is going to show?
Warm.
It's going to show a warm spot on the surface because behind it you've got that beehive. Or down low on a wall, if you've got a nest of mice, that wall where the nest of mice is going to be warmer than where they're not. Mm-hmm. And so I can look at that wall and I can't see a thing, but my picture shows that I've got a thermal anomaly and I've got to go try to figure out what it is. Now, if it's rodents of some kind, then we look for other signs. We look for droppings, we look for skeletal remains, we look for nests, if you can even see down there. Or It might just be as easy as having a little critter scurrying along the attic when I walk into the attic, which has happened more than once. I see that thing going away, and I think, okay, there's pests up here, and I'll put that in the report. Maybe I need to include video in my inspection reports.
Wear a body cam.
Body cam. Yeah, I'll have a GoPro on, and I'll take a video when I enter the attic. Duct leakage. Illustration. I was inspecting a home in Memorial Northwest, over in the Louetta area, Louetta Champion Forest. The house was built in 1972, and the man was actually inspecting the house before he sold it. He inherited the house from his parents, and they'd had the house since it was brand new. Nobody had ever lived in this house in 45 years almost. And as we were going through the house, we found a thermal anomaly, temperature difference, in the ceiling of the formal dining room. You walk in those old homes, and from the front door you got a formal dining room and a formal living room, and then you got the kitchen. And we looked up there at the ceiling, and there was this spot on the ceiling that at the time was colder, I believe, than the, and I'm trying to remember which way it was. No, it was hotter. There was a spot that was showing hotter than the rest of the area around it. There was no water pipes anywhere near. Like, okay, what is this? Trying to figure it out. I went up in the attic, went upstairs, and in the master bedroom above that room, there was a chase in the master bedroom closet, and where the ductwork was going from the furnace and the evaporator core in the attic, down the wall, in the ceiling, over to the kitchen. So I thought, I think I got a duct leak there. Turned the air conditioner on, let it run for a while, let it cool the house down, and what do you think happened to my image? It changed from that area being hotter than the area around it to that area being colder. We had a duct leak. Now, could I see it? No. It probably, one, it's been there for a long time, and it's possibly been there since the house was brand new. Right. The installation, they just didn't finish taping out that piece of duct that went right there. Might have been at a bend. I don't know. It was about right underneath, and so I think that it was at a bend, and it just didn't get entirely sealed up. So what do you have to do with that?
Cut a hole.
If you want to fix it, person might just say, oh, I'm just going to live with it. It's been there 45 years. I'm not going to mess with it. But if somebody wants to fix it, they're going to have to cut a hole in the sheetrock, get to access the ductwork, put some simple tape on it, and patch it up. It'd probably be $100 or $150 job. But we discovered that with that. Looking at the ceiling, it didn't show any stains. It didn't show any difference. It didn't look bad at all. And so insulation issues, electrical issues, moisture issues, door and window seals, pests, insulation. Those are a lot of the areas that you can detect issues with a thermal imaging camera that you might not be able to detect otherwise. But when you see the temperature difference, the inspector still has to go and investigate it with a moisture meter, an awl, his eyes, a flashlight. You've got to try to go there if you can, or surmise what the damage, what it could be, like the duct issue. I couldn't get to it, but seeing all the pieces to the puzzle right there was able to pretty well figure it out. And so those are some areas that could be helpful with that.
Question for you.
Yes, sir. I was going to say, any questions for you?
Yes. So not every inspector uses thermal imaging.
No.
Apparently you do. Mm-hmm. Is that an add-on service to the basic inspection?
Great question. For some, it is. For me, it's not. I use it when I feel like I need to. I don't use it on every single inspection, but I do use it all the time. Now, a complete thermal imaging inspection on a house, if you wanted that would be, it's almost a whole nother inspection. You go in,
you're looking at every wall, every ceiling.
You look at everything. You look at the roof, you look at the walls, you load up. Now, I load the bathrooms with water, tubs and showers, and if they're upstairs. And then I go look at them afterwards, because I want to see if anything's leaking, The house I bought in '99 had a little bitty drip, and it doesn't take much, just a drip. But a drip over years will cause a lot of damage. And in my den, there was a big hole. After our house flooded, my sheetrock guy said, take your ceilings out. He says, I want to fix those too. He said, there's a patch right there. And you can walk into a lot of houses and you see a lot of patches in ceilings that leak from bathrooms. And so a thermal image is going to go in and look at the house before you load everything with water. Then it's going to fill it with water, and you're going to let it sit there because that water might take a little while to seep into some places.
Right.
And then you go through with a scan after that. Best time to take a roof thermal image is at night, after you've had what we call solar loading, after everything's loaded with the sun, especially a flat roof. And the sun will load the roof with heat, but then where there's leaks, the water is cooler. And it'll show up. And it'll show up a lot more when you have that, when you've had that solar loading, that temperature difference. And so that's, but I use it on an electrical service panel. I take the breaker, the dead front off, point at it, look at it real quick, and I use it for that. And I look at it around bathrooms. But around every single wall, every single plumbing thing, if I load up a sink and I don't see any leaks there, I usually don't use that.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you wanted the whole thing, that would be different.
Sure.
Yeah. So, any other questions?
So why wouldn't you do it on every inspection? It takes time.
It does take time, yeah. And that's one reason why some inspectors don't use it at all. And there are some inspectors out there that have been inspectors for many, many, many years, some of the leaders in the inspection industry in Texas. They don't even own a camera. They don't have one. It's a matter of choice. It's a matter of opinion. They think that, I guess, they're good enough to find things. I like to have it because it really is a tremendous tool that can find things that you otherwise really wouldn't see, especially on the electrical service panel. That's critical. When my neighbor's house burned down, that woke me up. And I have a regular checkup on my service panel on my house, just like I'm supposed to have I have a regular checkup more often on my service panel than I do on me. But it's that important. Anything else? Any other questions? Is this helpful?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Okay. I got a question for you. Anyone ever have a grandparent or a parent who told you to close the refrigerator door, the front door?
Yes.
What did they say? Did they say something like this? You're letting the cold air out or you're letting the cold air in? Which
Yes.
is it? Are you letting the cold air out or are you letting the cold air in?
Depends what time of year it is.
It's a trick question and she's right. Cold air doesn't move. The heat always moves to the colder air, and what's it trying to do? Hot air, cold air. The hot air moves to the cold air to try to equalize the area. You put a cold pot on a hot stove. The heat is moving toward the cold pot, and the pot heats up. Remove the hot pot from the fire, and the heat from the pot is going to the colder air around it to equalize the area around it. Hot air always moves toward the cold air. So the next time that front door's open, you're not letting the cold air, if it's 70 degrees inside and it's 90 degrees outside, you're not letting the cold air out. The hot air is rushing in to try to equalize the environment so that the inside is the same temperature as the outside. In the winter, it's reversed. You've got the hot air on the inside and the cold air outside. When you open up the door, the heat goes out. And so it's not a trick question, but it's just the way that heat works. And that was one of the things that we actually studied a lot in the thermal imaging school, just to understand the way heat transfers. Heat moves in 3 different ways. Conduction through a solid, like when you're heating up a pot on a stove. Or your hand is next to something that's really hot. What's happening? Conduction. The heat is moving to your hand to try to equalize, and you pull away real fast. That's conduction. It also moves through convection. Convection is where it moves through air or liquid. The heat does. And then there's also what's called radiation, which is microwave type technology. So the next time you open up that cold door or that door and you feel a rush go by you, it's not cold air moving by you, it's the hot air actually attracting the cold air and going toward it. There are a lot of other topics in thermal imaging. Steady state, a delta T, emissivity, voids, transient conditions, solar loading, reflectivity, but we're not going to get into all those today. I just wanted you to understand the difference in a thermal anomaly and what the camera shows, and then what we as inspectors have to do to try to follow up that. Does that make
Yes.
sense? So now when we're going through a house, you understand a little bit about how we're discovering even some of the things that may become issues, like that beautiful bathroom right
Yes.
there. When I walked in, I thought, I want a shower like that.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Not with the leak that it had.
Did they had to tear up all that wood floor in the bath or in the
I
master?
don't know what they did, because I actually contacted the agent again and said, hey, what's going on in the house? I'm curious, because I like to follow up. I'll write my client a note and say, hey, how's it going? Anything else I can answer for you? And sometimes I get responses. Sometimes I never hear from them. Send the report. I never hear from anybody again. I like to follow up and hear how what I discovered is helping them in the process. And so I wrote the agent who's here in the Woodlands, and he told me what happened with it. He said the seller was working with us, but the buyer lost her job as a single mom, and her dad was working with her on it, and they had to back out of the deal. So I don't know what the seller was willing to do or did on the house to fix it. I hope that they fixed it before. The house is still in the market.
Right.
It's not a pending sale anymore. It's back active, and so on. I'm hoping that they cut the sheetrock out behind it because that would be the better place to try to figure it out and the easier place to repair it. Yes,
So
ma'am.
if you don't use them